Oh, hello there, guys. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. It's been a lot of months, but I'm finally getting back to hopefully finishing this book that I've probably been reading for the past 2 years to you guys. Which, by the way, I was thinking about if you started watching my videos when I was coming out with them, which was like 2020, so like 4 years ago. I was like 11 or 12. I'm now 16. You kind of watched me grow up a little bit. Somewhat. You could say that. Anyways, we're in chapter 13 of My Teacher Flunked the Planet by Bruce Coville. It's called Charlene. So, I'm just gonna go because I don't want to waste any more of your time if you've been waiting around for this. Hopefully you just read the book without me, because you don't need me to read the book. Just read it for yourself. Anyways, chapter 13, Charlene. I stood in the alley, gasping for breath, and looked at the kid who had dragged me from the riot. She was shorter than me, dressed in ragged clothes. She had shaggy brown hair and big eyes. She was fairly ugly, as kids go. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked when my breathing had slowed a bit. Suddenly I realized what she had said when she first saw me. "And why did you call me Krepta? Who are you anyway?" She smiled. "People around here call me Charlene, but you know me by another name." I stared at her. After a moment, she put her fingers to her neck and pulled aside just enough skin to reveal a patch of blue underneath. "Hulan!" I cried with joy. "You were expecting maybe Darth Vader? Where have you been? How long have you been better? Why didn't you join us? Have you been—" "Peace, peace," he said, putting up his hands to stop my flow of questions, one at a time. "I've been working in my own way, which is what I usually do. You have to understand, Peter, that I'm a bit of a renegade. The Interplanetary Council does not entirely approve of me." He paused and said, "Actually, I don't think they approve of me at all, but they feel they owe me some respect, since I used to be Prime Member." I looked at him in awe. "Prime Member? Does that mean what I think it does?" Hulan smiled. Peace. "If you mean was I ruler of the galaxy, the answer is yes." "I knew it. You kept putting me off when I asked you who you really were, but I knew there was something special about you." "There's something special about everyone," said Hulan. Then he waved his hand in a very earthling-like gesture. "Anyway, don't take that Prime Minister thing too seriously. Title aside, I didn't have as much power as you think. That was one reason I resigned. It was too hard to get things done. To tell you the truth, there were times when I had to resort to being downright sneaky." I wanted to ask him when and why, but he waved his hand again. "Enough of that. I want to know how things have gone with your mission." "Not very well," I said, feeling a sudden depression at admitting the fact. "We've found a lot of stuff, both good and bad, but I don't think anything we've found will convince the Council to let us into the Interplanetary League." Of course, that wasn't the real issue. "I'm not sure anything will convince them it's safe to let us continue to exist." Hulan nodded. "How are things out there?" I asked, rolling my eyes skyward. "Not good. Opinion is shifting against you, especially since we're doing a close monitoring now, and the anti-alien demonstrations are being reported across the galaxy." "That's not fair. The main reason those demonstrations are going on is that you guys have scared people." I would think the idea that you were not alone in the universe would make you feel safer," said Hulan. "The reaction on every other planet at finding other life in the galaxy has been joy. They rejoice because it doesn't occur to them to be afraid. You fear because it doesn't occur to you to rejoice, which is a large part of the problem." I wasn't in the mood for another lecture on the moral flaws of Earthlings. "Did you hear about Duncan?" I asked. Hulan smiled. "I not only heard about Duncan, I tended to the situation." The end of my question was drowned out by a roar from the end of the alley. The riot seemed to be getting worse. "Come on," said Hulan, taking my arm. "We have to get out of here. We can talk more later." "I can't leave without Susan and the others." Hulan dragged me to the end of the alley. The crowd still surged back and forth. A whiff of tear gas made my eyes sting. "Do you think you can find them out there?" he asked. I shook my head. It was impossible. "What do we do?" I asked. "Can you go invisible?" I nodded. Then best do so. If we keep our backs to the buildings and our hands in contact, we should be able to get into the open. We'll decide what to do next after we're in the clear. I switched myself invisible and followed him. Side by side, hands touching, we eased our way along the edge of the mob. I felt again how it was like a living thing, with the people seeming to act as a single mass rather than as individuals. Several people were pushed so close they touched me. Normally, brushing against an invisible person would have caused them to draw away in fear. Now, with their focus on the riot, they barely noticed. Where were Susan, Broxholm, and Creeblen? I hoped they had managed to get out safely. I remembered how it had felt when I fell and people were running over me, and shuddered at the idea of that happening to Susan. It took nearly 15 minutes to get away from the riot. Once we were clear of it, we ran for several blocks before stopping to become visible again. What an experience, I gasped. An experience. Leaning against a wall. Remember it, said Hulan. It may be part of the answer. What do you mean? If your people saw that, they'd probably decide to get rid of us immediately. Hulan shrugged. I had noticed that of all the aliens, he was the one whose gestures were most human-like. Another alien's shrugs or winks might mean anything from "you have beautiful ear hair" to "run away," but with Hulan, such gestures rarely needed translation. Krogtalk is still analyzing the data he gathered when he removed your brain, he said. He has a whole team of scientists working on it. They're also examining what happened to me when I made contact with your brain. I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to hurt you. Of course you didn't. Anyway, it was my fault for moving too fast. Scary experience, though. I certainly wasn't prepared for the vastness of what I found. We can talk about that once things settle down. For now, we have to figure out where to go next. Shouldn't we go back to our base of operations? He shrugged again. It depends on what we want to do. It might be interesting for Broxholm and Creeblen if you go missing too. Give them a bit to think about. They'll be terrified. A little terror won't hurt them. It may loosen up their juices, get them thinking more clearly. Whatever had happened to Hulan while he was in his coma, he had come out of it as strange and confusing as ever. Where do you think we should go? I asked. I've been staying at a shelter for kids on the run. You're a little too young for it, but I think you'll be all right there. Might do you some good. You'll meet a few old friends. Old friends? Hulan smiled mysteriously. I knew him well enough to know that I wasn't likely to get any more information out of him at this point. With a sigh, I started to follow him. We must have walked for a mile or two, ending up in a section of the city that I would have been happier to visit with Broxholm at my side, since he's the strongest being I have ever met. Coming here with Hulan didn't feel nearly so safe, especially since it was starting to get dark. Here we are, he said as we reached a building that looked like it had once been a church. A wooden sign in front announced that it was the Tisha Hamilton Home for Wayward Boys. Only boys had been crossed out and the word youth painted above it, so I assumed they had decided not to discriminate on the basis of sex. You'd better call me Charlene as long as we're in here. You'd better call me Charlene as long as we're in here, said Hulan as he opened the door. I felt pretty nervous when we stepped inside. Most of the kids hanging around looked older and tougher than me. Then Charlene led me to a kid sitting against the wall and whispered, Peter, this is someone you know quite well. The kid stood up. Peter? My eyes went wide. Duncan? Shh! In this place I'm known as Roger. Duncan was wearing a mask that made his face look completely different. I was beginning to feel like no one had his or her own face anymore. Then I saw two people who did have their own faces, a man and a woman leading a discussion group in the far corner of the main room. The shock was so powerful that my knees began to wobble and I had to grab Hulan's arm to keep from collapsing. And that's the end of chapter 13. Kind of a cliffhanger. That's what they like to do to us. That's what Bruce likes to do to us. Anyways, chapter 14 coming out in a little bit. Stay tuned. I'm back, by the way.